Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jared and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special guest episode today. We've got Anthony and Peter McKelvy, the managing partners and founders of Northern Re. Welcome to the studio, both.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, guys.
And we were really keen, before we go into the incredible idea of a data-driven reinsurer, how did you end up starting Northern Re? What are your backgrounds in the space? Do you want to start us off, Peter, maybe?
Sure. So my background's actually mostly in technology companies. So I used to wear black T-shirts, much like you guys, every day to work. I found myself at Uber, which was still a black car company at the time, and founded a technology group as a product manager focused on compliance. So background checks, documents, should you be in the car with the driver who's driving you? Mm-hmm. And insurance was actually part of my remit as well. And so figured out sort of how to do that in the US and then went global. After we went public, I was looking for something else to do. Anthony was at a company called Boost, which was an MGA out of a box concept in New York City. Mm-hmm. He was running capital markets over there. I came in to run product and strategy. And then we started kicking around sort of what other problems we could solve in the space. And reinsurance kept coming back as top of mind.
Yeah, very exciting.
Cool. My background is more traditional reinsurance. So I started at Willis Re when it was Willis Re and then moved over to Guy Carpenter. Always worked for their program units, so kind of grew up in the MGA and program carrier space. Was down in Dallas and then moved up to New York, as Peter mentioned, in 2018 to lead business development and really risk capital for an insurtech company called Boost. There we were providing capacity, which is my remit, technology and services to anybody that wanted to become an MGA. Throughout that time and my career, I spent a lot of time working with capital markets, private capital, ILS players, and collateralized reinsurers. Mm-hmm. So became intricately familiar with structuring those transactions and sort of the nuances that went into those types of deals. And so when we were working on this concept of what we were going to do next, again, my expertise and Peter's deal-making experience on the family office side, which I'll talk a little bit about, really lent itself to that. Northern, we after about 18 or so months of kicking things around, we launched in August of 22, and we quickly went out to set up the segregated portfolio company, which is similar to a segregated account company in Bermuda, if you're familiar, but it was actually Cayman-based. So we did a pretty hefty jurisdictional analysis on what made the most sense for us and what kind of our goal and our mission was, and we landed on Cayman just given the kind of 40, 50-year precedent of the service providers there, the laws that upheld segregated account structures, and kind of everything that went with it. So the goal was to start really a casualty-focused reinsurer that primary lines of business included everything from general liability, commercial auto, professional lines, workers' compensation, anything that was high frequency, low severity is kind of the buzz phrase. And we thought that this was a really interesting product to introduce the investment community to because it presented a lot of advantageous characteristics. It was low beta, or it is low beta, I should say. It is sort of a steady Eddie return profile as opposed to more catastrophe exposed business. And ultimately we had access and expertise in structuring, as I mentioned, the transactions. I'll kind of stop there, but yeah, happy to dive in.
Very exciting.
Yeah, just really quickly, because I'm already super interested to dive into like the nuance of this. A lot of listeners of the podcast are earlier in their career. Do you want to just spend a few minutes on like low and high beta and like what the interest for the investment community is with products like that?
Sure. So I think one big advantage that we see, and we refer to it as kind of low beta, if you look at historical returns of various asset classes, whether that be private credit or the stock market, anything that you might be able to invest into as a young investor who might be starting out, or even institutional capital, right? Things like real estate or other. This represents something entirely different, right? We are truly purchasing insurance company liabilities that represent portfolios of insurance risk. So this is much different than purchasing the stock of a large big name insurer or reinsurer. This is truly investing in the asset class of insurance and reinsurance. And what I mean by that is, I'll use an example of specifically what we do in terms of lines of business. We focus on things like car crashes, slips and falls, right? Those are very predictable things that happen year over year, albeit some various anomalies, things like COVID or other major events, are relatively predictable, right? And so this gets into the focus of being a very data-driven reinsurer, which I know we'll get into, but looking at both the kind of macro data that's involved in those types of risks, but then also the specific portfolios, how they've performed over time, how many years they've performed over time. That's critical to our business model and reducing the volatility for investors, which is the other piece that's important.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you look at U.S. stock market returns versus casualty ILS, which is what we do here, there's no real correlation, and so I think that's that low beta aspect that he's talking about.
Makes sense.
And I guess historically, that low correlation has been really important to investors, but they've maybe more typically expected that in exchange for that, they've had to take the hit or bust. Will there be a hurricane or won't there?
Correct.
Option, right?
Exactly. And so, ILS in the cat world is well understood, right? People have been doing it since the 90s. We are not, weather modelers, and we don't think that we necessarily have an edge in that arena. And so where we did have sort of a competitive advantage was on the casualty side. And we found a model that makes those returns quite attractive. You do take on a bit more tail as a result, but investors are willing to trade that tail for predictability and returns.
Yeah.
Nice. So I think we can ask the question then. So what is a data-driven reinsurer? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I guess I'll talk about it first from more of the front end of the house, the types of portfolios that we're looking at and how we analyze that. And I'll let Peter dive in on sort of how we're taking in that data, how we're then utilizing it to be a better company. So first, we talked a little bit about our model. A big part of that, obviously, the underwriting guidelines that we abide by. MGA business and program business is inherently a bit more nuanced, say, than traditional reinsurance. What I mean by that is there are various aspects to these deals that may not exist. If you're looking at a typical large insurer placement, that's everything from management teams, that's everything from of course, the experience, it's who the service providers are, from TPAs to back office. There is a ton of data around that in terms of, how those management teams have performed historically, let's say. What did their last MGA look like? What was their prior track record, either at an MGA or a larger carrier, right? Those are all things that we can evaluate, take into our actuarial models, along with the experience that comes with the current program. And so as sort of a hard and fast rule, with our current allocated capital of about $75 million, what we look at is at least 3 to 5 years of historical and credible experience. So that word credible is important, right? Because I think the data quality in which we are receiving the submission material, the types of fields that are included within that, the sort of summary sheets, it's just simply not enough, right? We have a chief underwriting officer who's not here with us today, but his background was the ex-chief pricing actuary at Everest Re. And so he's seen quite a bit of the world. He knows, what matters when it comes to actuarial pricing. And so what we're doing now is incorporating a lot of that into, those various elements that I've described, right? Trying to look at more traditional ways of pricing, but then also taking some of those MGA elements and bringing them into the fold so that we can build out our own more internal type proprietary modeling.
Yeah.
Nice. So you're slightly led by which cedants or which MGAs are able to provide you with high quality data, and that sort of they get to work with you if they've got good enough data? Is that sort of the situation?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So I mentioned kind of the amount of data, the number of years. That's important, especially depending on the line of business, whether it's much longer tail, more medium, which is where we really focus. But then there is the element of, can they provide us with bordereau level information, right? Can they provide us with loss runs dating back to those years, right? And I think the more we can get our hands on that, the more credibility around pricing, which in turn benefits the MGAs, it benefits the cedents, right? Because we don't need as much of a swing on, say, a sliding scale, a corridor, a cap, if we've got that history to really base our pick off of.
Yeah, and this is a theme that the reinsurers bring up a lot in conversations with us, is the lack of confidence in what the data says, right? If you sort of say, here is just the bands with numbers in there, or the result of the output of like the change over year, but you can't actually drill into the data or validate that. Like, the reinsurers over time have sort of learned that confidence in that is actually not that high unless you can validate that. So I think you're looking at the right way. And one of the things we think about where we build software is, how do we have it where they do that data work faster, but also provide their partners with a greater level of clarity and granularity around what is the result of these things, how did it come together, and where is the data that actually justifies and showcases what that looks like. And hopefully that drives sort of other tooling that you guys are building in-house or looking at.
Yeah, I think on the intake side is one that we are still very much working on. On the submission side is just like how to take in these disparate, if we take in 100 submissions a year, it's more difficult for us to standardize those out of the box. And that's obviously something you guys have worked heavily on, and you've based an entire company around. Where we are getting quite strong is on the, I think we had 18 programs report to us last month that we're on different deals with. Probably 14 different program carriers. And so you still see very disparate reporting mechanisms, different fields. It is difficult, but it's a more solvable problem than trying to take in 100 of them.
Yeah.
And so our North Star is, hey, how do I get real-time data to inform my collateral models? Because our collateral models basically drive our business, right?
Yeah.
How do I know that I am going to have the right amount of capacity at, whenever people call, quarterly, annually, whatever it is? And how do I maximize the number of deals that I can be behind with that capacity that I have allocated?
Yeah.
In order to do that, I need real-time data, ideally. That problem has not been solved yet.
Yeah.
But we have been able to drive the program carriers to give us solid monthly, at most every other month, data coming in. Okay, great. How do I break that down? How do I disaggregate that into something that I can actually use? And we've been solving that problem using a mix of our own proprietary stuff and then also different vendors who have been helpful in that problem.
I think, part of the issue there is, we have in the program space, you have an MGA, you have a carrier, you have a reinsurance broker, you have, oftentimes many different reinsurers. Within certain programs, there could be, two sets of business, whether that's admitted, non-admitted, A versus B. And so you have, what could be sort of 6, 7 different reporting cycles that all need to come into one market, which is, again, another sort of nuance of this business. I think that's been, a challenge, right, is getting that standardized. Especially with newer programs, right, business that's coming on, that our internal database or the vendors we're working with might need to go through another setup process, right? And so I think with AI and things like that, it's getting better and easier. But ultimately, again, we have an opportunity here to build a reinsurer from the ground up. What we don't want to do and what we're very kind of steadfast about is falling into that same trap, right? Throwing bodies at something where we know technology can solve it. Maybe there's a little bit of short-term pain there, but ultimately, again, we want to be that tech-first reinsurer.
Absolutely, and I guess you have the luxury of choice in some ways, that because you're starting out, and you can ask cedents to fit inside your box. You know, you haven't got an existing portfolio where you have to say, oh, if we want to keep that relationship going, we have to put up with it the way it's always been. You can kind of say, no, this is the way that it works with us.
It certainly works to an extent.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can sort of force people into. And so then it's training your models to figure out, okay, this is how they're going to report. Hopefully they're not going to change it every month on you. But even if they do, there are ways to identify that quickly and make sure that by the time it's getting into our databases so that we can use it for our modeling purposes, it is in one sort of set that, you know, speaks the same language. The data dictionary is quite clear, and, you know, we don't have problems, right?
Yeah. And
you don't have these different layers of information that you're dealing with.
Yeah, it makes sense. And in that data set that you mentioned, you know, where you're asking for certain things quite consistently, how would you compare and contrast that, I guess, to what a reinsurer might typically ask for? Are you asking for new things that maybe they're not used to providing, or is it just solid versions of what they probably should have been providing all along, or third-party stuff?
It depends on both the MGA and on the carrier, what they have asked for previously and what they've gotten. I think sometimes they are surprised, newer relationships are surprised that we want as much detail as we're asking for. But, you know, these are professional shops. They've got it. Just because they've never, you know, run all policy data or all claims data before and given it to everyone, they've just previously done a summary, doesn't mean they don't have it or they can't produce it. It just means someone hasn't asked for it. I think Anthony and I are consistently surprised at you know, what is originally provided and then what we ask for on the back end.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the carriers we're working with, especially on the program side, they are modern companies, right? They've all been set up really. I mean, that kind of new fronting space or program carrier space only dates back to 2016, right? After kind of the acquisition with State National Markel. And, you know, right when they really started to get funded, it's not that long ago, right? And so you do have technology systems that are relatively newer. You do have technology teams within carriers who are, I think, smarter than, you know, historically, you know, a lot of those sort of North Stars have been, right? So they are building it the right way, and it just takes sort of us going after and requesting that information, you know, to actually get it, which I think we've been successful with
100%
to date.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, we just brought over a chief underwriting officer from a large publicly traded reinsurer, and hearing his horror stories about trying to get data around his previously global portfolio and the changes or the amount of time it might take him to introduce a new piece of software or even request data sets is, I guess, not surprising coming from a large enterprise. But for us, it's like, oh yeah, let me get you that in 2 seconds. Or if we need to make a change, oh yeah, no problem. Let me just give me a couple hours.
That's a great point, because the large nationals or multinationals, they're getting that data. It's usually 12 months behind, right? So they're getting it at renewal when they need to reprice the portfolio. There's just no bandwidth or wherewithal to evaluate that on a monthly basis, which I think is one of the advantages of the MGA space. You just have much leaner organizations who are able to be much more reactive, I think, because they're analyzing things in real time, and then by the time it makes it up to us, maybe 30 days after the fact, we have an enormous advantage there, right? Especially if you're able to have conversations with those entities to drive you know, certain changes or what you're seeing, right? Because as a reinsurer, we are kind of aggregators of information, certainly across lines of business and different sectors. So I think that's a major difference in terms of, you know, what's being provided monthly. Well, the larger markets might just need the summary and they can put it into their database. We actually do want that level of detail so that we can do a bit more with it.
Yeah, and then, you know, you start having the submission data from, I got 3, 4, 5 years of submission data, plus I've got the newer year I'm taking in, you know, every month. If I can combine all of that, I've got a better submission perhaps than is going to go out to the rest of the market. And now I've got market intelligence that our team is more able to maybe accurately price a deal and give us an edge.
Yeah. How do you think about access and deal flow then in that sense? Obviously, there's a huge competitive advantage for how you're able to use the data to turn around insights and price and understand risk. But there's still this hurdle of how do you get presented the deals? How do the deals that are going currently to all the major companies, how do you get access to those? How do you think about that part of the journey?
Yeah, so I think it's multifold, right? One, we've been fortunate with our backgrounds to have direct access to opportunities with MGAs. I think even in those instances, brokers are involved, right? There's a huge amount of value that's being provided there across the spectrum, not only just initially getting to see the business, but then also through that submission process, through the contracting cycle, and afterwards, right, the reporting and the remitting aspect of it. So generally, we see them as the source of truth. We work with all the major names, as well as a lot of the smaller folks that are based here and globally. I think the third piece, and I know we've maybe chatted about this in the past, but it's sort of that marketplace approach where brokers are using a marketplace to put their deals on, and then folks like us who may not have that specific relationship with that office or that individual can go on and actually review those opportunities in more of a live fashion, right?
Yeah.
And utilize all the tools that exist within that platform as well to inform our decisions. So we continue to see business from a variety of different sources.
Yeah, I think Anthony's background as a broker is obviously very helpful there. The other thing, you guys as founders deeply understand user research. And the user research that we were doing was with the founders and CEOs of major fronting carriers, right? And those are the people who are really the decision makers around who sees business, what the terms might look like, how we get on marketing lists. And so by including those people really early in sort of putting together Northern Re and understanding from them, hey, what are the problems you have with collateralized markets, figuring out a way to assuage them of those concerns, we're able to sort of come 360 and now do business with those guys. And that's been really helpful in getting us exposure and getting us the deal flow that we want.
I like it. And one thing I wanted to come back to that I think you mentioned earlier around the real-time aspect of those relationships.
Sure.
I suppose you could promise to those early partners, as an advisor, as a partner, we're going to be much more responsive than someone who you only chat to once a year. You're going to get advance notice of anything that's going on in portfolios at large because we're going to see it before anyone else and help you handle it.
No question about it. And that's, we keep those lines of communication open, right? Those guys have our cell phone numbers if they need them, but we also have just sort of regular touch points. Being in New York, going into Dallas and different places where there's sort of hubs of the folks kind of running the show, if you will, does allow us to do that. And then we've set up some monitoring so that in real time or as close to it as we can get on the data at this point, we can understand trends. Those guys, those people have huge shops as well, right? They're advanced, they know what's going on, but there's a chance that we catch things that they're maybe not looking at and can make sure that we use the partnership effectively.
And I would say we're seeking out folks who want that level of back and forth, right? We're sure somebody who does something in a black box might perform really well. It's just not necessarily the type of partnership that we're looking for, right? Yeah. We're going to be in this business a long time, and we want the people that we work with, to be in it with us, right? It's not something that we see as necessarily super opportunistic. We've got a much longer time horizon, I think, than a lot of folks.
Yeah. How do you think about like the journey for yourselves and like the sort of broader direction of travel? What do you want to achieve over the next several years? How do you think about the broader sort of macro trends? Obviously, the ILS community has this reliance on what the investors want to be doing, where they want to be deploying their capital. How do you think about the journey you guys are going on from here at this point?
Yeah, so if I didn't mention, we've raised $75 million in capital today. We do a lot of things differently with our capital stack and the way that we collateralize our obligations, which we refer to as kind of carrier first in the marketplace, which I think has been received very, very well. I think we've been fortunate to work with investors who also understand insurance as an asset class. And with that, we've been really able to stick with our remit of the casualty, high frequency, low severity, ILS mandate. And I think, as we go out and speak with other investors, that's really something that, we hold near and dear to our hearts because we have this advantage, this expertise, and this ability. And so, I think over the next several years, we'll be continuing to raise capital and support the market, in the direction that we see it going, which we're quite bullish on. A lot of varying lines of business, the way that the program market is trending. We're working with a lot of regional mutual insurance companies as well, as we see capacity drying up there, and the education about collateralized reinsurance and ILS makes its way into that world. You see AM Best now coming out publicly and saying these types of partnerships are really important for the marketplace. And so, it's been an interesting 18 months, and I hope, I think that the next 18 will be, even brighter. So
yeah, we, our model is very efficient. And we think that it provides a really good blueprint for how casualty ILS should be done. There are a number of other peer companies out there that you guys know and are familiar with, and I'm sure your listeners are familiar with as well. There's plenty of business.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their own sort of secret sauce and something special about how they do things. We do think ours is a great model, and we'll continue to add capital to it. The U.S. program business is enormous.
Yeah.
Right. There is a lot of opportunity there. We are just starting to see some European business, and I think we just did our first whole account that had some European business in it. There's a lot of global business out there that we will eventually get to. So there's not really the sky's the limit in terms of how we can use this model to effectively deploy capital to make partnerships that are long-lasting and really beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I also think you see across the industry a real increase in the recognition of MGAs being an effective way to access risk for a carrier as well. So there's a continuing growing of that, which lends itself very nicely to where you guys then sit off the other end of those relationships. So the continuing boom of MGAs will certainly...
you think about the modernization of how insurance is sold to an end consumer, to a business, and the lack of modernization on the reinsurance side. And we think the reinsurers are, a good 10 years behind, but we like to think that we're at the forefront of starting to push that forward.
Yeah. And I think you've made very clear today the massive attractiveness both to the clients, the investor base as well. I imagine, a very self-selecting narrative for the investors as well, right? The best clients are going to come to us because they're the ones who can. But also to the talent, right? The people you've been able to attract to your team, that partly comes from, as you say, the reinsurers being 10 years behind to some extent. Somebody sat there maybe mid-career thinking, the rest of my career going to be stuck like this, waiting for, 3-year IT projects to give me slightly better view of risk, or... has it been easy to find the right people to get them to join your team? Are you excited about bringing on more people of any particular profile as you go forwards?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think, as you all are aware, in a startup, you kind of go out and you want to find this very specific person. As you go through the process, I think you learn even more about what it is you really need, right, and what the makeup of that individual is. And I think we've gone through that a couple of times now, and we've been really, really happy. Part of that is taking our time, right? We are, I think, always going to be a very lean shop. That's just the nature of our business, and utilizing technology, to perform tasks and services and processes that otherwise might take several individuals, right? So making sure that you're bringing on folks who share that mentality, right? And have sort of that level of knowledge, or are willing to learn, that level of knowledge around, tech and tech forward initiatives, I think is critical. As we look to grow, I think it's all dependent on the level of capital raised, but we'll continue to build out sort of the financial side of things in conjunction with underwriting and pricing. We've talked about data quite a bit. We are a very analytical shop. We see the value in our underwriters, having that background, right? Having a bit of the pricing knowledge so that they can speak that language is really important to us. So.
It's been great. I think we've had really good reception from individuals in the marketplace when we've gone out to say, hey, you can come hop and do this with us. People are excited about it. Right. Yeah. And, we added a super powerful CUO, Vincent, who's been absolutely fantastic. And I think, there's a bit of culture shock when you come from a large multinational and suddenly you're in a much smaller place. Right. But it comes with a lot more flexibility, and certain people, as you guys know, are excited about that. Yeah. Right. Like I've been a startup guy my whole career. And so looking for that when you're hiring has been effective. Yeah. We're also hiring in Cayman, right? So our infrastructure is based in Cayman. We found a great guy, Sim, down there to sort of start leading our operation. And, he was at a large multinational kind of operation too. And just interviewing him over a couple of months, you can just get the sense, okay, this guy, if I get the sort of trappings of that off of him and let him really run and create something, he's going to be a great partner for us. And so it's been exciting recruiting. I think for us, sort of, next hires, we're looking at a couple of things. Maybe some more help on the underwriting side. Maybe the capital markets side. We'll kind of see how it goes over the next 3 or 4 months. Right now, we're letting the dust settle and sort of finishing the year.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, we know quite a few people in sort of early reinsurer stories of old things. So it's really exciting to hear. This could be one of the big ones that's now in its early stages, but top 5 reinsurer one day kind of thing. When you think about that sort of thing, do you think that there are certain choices you're making that are defining of the class of 22, 23 almost, and it's going to be, people will look back and go, well, these new folks, Northern Re, prime amongst them, introduced this whole new way of doing reinsurance, or what do you think people would reflect back on in 10 years' time and go, oh, that's how what a reinsurer means started to change?
I think the data side will help tremendously, just like from first principles, not hiring people, not using mechanical Turk to do everything, and actually working to train models and figure out technology solutions. AI is such a hot word, but like trying to use the different technologies that actually are available to us, experimenting with it, not being afraid to fail, and sort of moving on, taking sort of that tech startup mentality to it. The other thing that I think is important just on the people side is after the Vestu collapse, just being the guys who stood up and said, hey, send us your portfolios, we'll take a look at it, and we want to help the group in aggregate make sure that we can recover responsibly from this. We put our hands up, and I think people will look back on that and say, okay, Northern Re really put their money where their mouth is and help the industry sort of stand back up.
Well, I think it's such an extreme example as well, because you had their model essentially was so automated, so only tech, where you're sort of looking at it going, no, we're still going to be a traditional company. We're just going to utilize technology in the most impactful way possible. But we'll still have underwriters. We'll still recruit and hire like executives who've done this job for their whole career, who are like professionals in this space. And we will empower them with technology, but it won't be one where, everyone just gets out of the way, the computers do everything, which wasn't really actually happening anyway. But
it's true. And that's exactly, I think we all see where InsurTech is going now, right? Sort of this next iteration is, there are elements of traditional insurance, but it's powered by technology, right? And it's an incredibly important aspect, because I think a lot of lessons obviously were learned early on, both by us as well as the venture market and the others, right?
Well, I think it's very central to kind of how where we position ourselves. It's like we're not trying to pull people out of the chain. What we're saying is there's a ton of friction that is happening that is preventing those individuals and those experts from like effectively doing the best job that they're able to do. And like you should build software and build solutions that like take those things out, so like your underwriters and your team like can just get into the things that matter and be able to identify the best risks and price them correctly and like win deals, but like maximizing the best that they can give you because you've leveraged technology there. It's like, again, the same way we sort of approach this space.
It goes back to like you guys, I would imagine, did a lot of user research and figured out, okay, what are your problems? And then you thought about how you could solve them. Yeah. Some of the earlier iterations, I think, just came up with a solution to a problem that they didn't necessarily actually identify. And that's pretty much never worked out for anyone. And on the reinsurance side, you picture that with really high aggressive growth, and it's just not going to work out for you. So,
yeah, and I think it's really exciting to see your particular backgrounds come in here, right? I mean, likewise, reinsurance people on our side, but you've somehow, through family, managed, which is cool. We didn't really touch on it, but you've managed to marry, a true reinsurance person with a true technology person and come together to solve an issue, right? That's really rare, but really important, right? I think if you just have pure reinsurance or just pure technology, you're going to take the wrong steps. But yeah, kudos for bringing the family together to tackle it with all of the options available. What's that been like? Just as maybe a finishing note, because I think we are coming towards time working together as brothers.
Look, I think I've got 3 younger brothers. Me being the youngest of them. I don't think I could do it with the other 2. But they're also founders. So whatever my mom was putting in the cereal as kids, sort of bred that into us. Working with your brother, someone you can trust implicitly, is incredible, right? We know that we can go our separate ways, and we're always working to make this the best company as possible. And there's a lot of just simpatico going on without us necessarily talking about it. So it's been great. We've really enjoyed it.
No doubt. And you hit on kind of the our 2 areas of expertise. I think that there is a cross section there that works really nicely, but there are also areas of the business where we both we trust in the other, right? And it's also this sort of the come together, hey, let's look at this a little bit differently. Whereas I've been living it for 10 years. What do you mean? This is how you do it. And he goes, no, that's not why you should do it this way. And so I think that's been cool to see, especially as we bring in other folks to that mix, right? Who have various backgrounds and personalities, and the culture is a really interesting thing as well, as you guys know, building that. From the ground up, it's critical, especially at an early juncture. And so it's been, as Peter said, really really cool. So far.
That diversity of thought is like immensely valuable when you're tackling a space like ours, where you have what are things that can't change because the industry won't allow them and they shouldn't change, but you also are getting people who are like challenging so many things. And you get to kind of like lean into them and see if there's something there. So that's super exciting. Like we're excited. We love this space. We love the creativity of what you guys are doing here. So thank you for coming on the show. It's been a delight.
Of course. Thank you guys. And as I said before, congratulations on all the success so far. And
thank you.
I'm sure we'll be working together soon.
Looking forward to it.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website at supercede.com/podcasts. You'll find the links in the show notes.